Welcome back, boils and ghouls. Remember, if you enjoy these videos, hit that like button. Think about getting in the comment section below and letting me know. Share these videos with your friends, and if you really enjoy what you see, make sure you Hulk smash that subscribe button. If you feel like you're in a position to support the channel, you can find links to my Patreon as well as tons of other merch like shirts, hats, and masks in the description below. But now it is trivia time. Alex Ross is one of the most prolific and well-respected artists in the comics field today. His seminal work on Marvel's and Kingdom Come for Marvel and DC respectively in the early 1990s almost instantly made him a legend. His luscious interiors and meticulous eye for detail resonated with fans in a way very few other people's work has. Today, however, Ross has become much better known as a cover artist, having all but abandoned interior work following Kingdom Come's conclusion in 1996. While Ross was predominantly known for many years following Kingdom Come for contributing covers to nearly every one of DC's most iconic characters, in recent years, he's become much more synonymous with Marvel. If he hasn't done a run on covers for one of their titles, he's almost invariably created at least a variant cover for it lately. Among the barrage of nearly weekly Ross covers from Marvel, the recent series of timeless variants stood out. They felt very different somehow, but I couldn't put my finger on why until now. I'm a huge Alex Ross fan, and as he's released a series of interviews for his channel over the past few months, I've been following them and kind of gleaning them for information, and I've come up with some really interesting stuff. While it may be common knowledge to some people, I only recently discovered the truth behind Alex Ross's series of timeless variants, and I thought it was definitely worth sharing with you all here tonight. So, without further ado, kick back and enjoy this tasty tidbit of tawdry trivia and a little video essay I like to call The Secret Origins of Alex Ross's Timeless Variants. What? I said it was a title. I never said it was going to be a good title. As I mentioned, Alex Ross became extremely well known in the 90s for his work on Kingdom Come and Marvel's. However, he quickly abandoned interior work following the final issue of Kingdom Come. Ironically, covers not only paid better, but they offered the oftentimes somewhat headstrong artist a great deal more freedom than working on interiors ever did. The pay was better, the deadlines were easier to meet, and over the past 2 decades, Alex Ross has seen more exposure than any interior artist I can think of. While obviously covers are a lot flashier, and they allow an artist to kind of strut their stuff a little more per se, which helps amount for some of his reputation, Ross also maintains a constant and steady work schedule that would drive most people insane. Seriously, in the past few years alone, he's had an incredible run on the Immortal Hulk series, painting every single cover for the 43 issues released as of the recording of this video in January of 2021, on top of contributing covers monthly for both Captain America and the now ongoing Iron Man series, which he helped to redesign. And that's just regular ongoing titles. There's also at least one Marvel title that features a B cover or a ratio variant cover done by Alex Ross once a month as well. On top of this, after 25 years of almost zero interior work, he's also finally come up with an idea that would allow him to reliably contribute monthly pages again in the form of the Marvel title, where of course he's also doing the main covers. There's also an ongoing series of one-shots called Marvel Snapshots, featuring a rotating cast of Marvel's biggest and best, with covers from Alex Ross that are coming out monthly at this point. Like I said, Alex Ross likes to keep busy, despite the fact his schedule will drive most people to the brink of insanity. Ross has actually always appeared to kind of enjoy keeping busy. He talks a lot about the finite amount of time that he has in which he can work and produce art, and while not morbid, Ross is definitely aware that his abilities as a painter won't last forever, and he's not about to squander a single second of the time that he has. It's only been in the past 2 years or so, when watching and reading interviews, that Ross has intimated he might be wearing himself a little thin. While he's kind of longed for some time off, he's had a very difficult time saying no and turning work down, though. Not only because of the money, but because of his long-held stance on using every moment that you have at your disposal as productively as possible. If you watch or read interviews, you'll see his desire to take a little breather and recharge his batteries pop up more and more in conversation, especially throughout 2019 into 2020. So when the COVID-19 lockdown order hit and comic shops shut down, a lot of publishers didn't really know what was going to happen. Almost all artists were given a pencils down order while companies figured stuff out. It seemed like almost kismet for Ross, karma, intervening to tell him it was okay to take a break. And for those who don't know, a pencils down order is exactly what it sounds like. It's orders from the publisher to discontinue work on whatever you're doing right then and right there. I actually just talked about one of the most interesting pencils down orders I've ever heard in my Sam Keith Nightmare on Elm Street episode. If you want to learn a little bit more about those or that, there should be a little card or something around here. And if not, there's a link in the description below. According to the interviews, Ross was basically wrapping up work on most everything he was doing at the time the pencils down order came anyways. And he enjoyed a short break from his intensive workload. Apparently, this didn't really last long though, and he quickly began work on a few personal pieces out of sheer boredom. Again, as if by fate, he was contacted by Marvel for what would prove to be a rather interesting, if possibly banal, proposition at the time. Marvel was interested in commissioning Ross to paint a mural featuring an assortment of their most popular characters that would appear on the walls of the official Marvel offices. Ross is not the first person to be approached about doing this, nor would he be the first to accomplish it. And I've seen a few different pictures featuring the wall where I believe Ross's art now appears in the Marvel offices over the years, starting especially right around when Joe Quesada took over. While he didn't turn them down initially, Ross really wasn't that interested in creating just another simple static mural. He's done hundreds, perhaps thousands of portraits at this point, and when approached by Marvel for the mural, he talked about his fear of people getting tired of his work, saying that he often feels like he's doing the same thing over and over again. The idea of repetition and boring his fan base is something Alex Ross talks a lot about, and he's very conscious of. So for the Marvel mural, he didn't just want to do the same old thing. After some brainstorming, Ross rather quickly and ingeniously hit on the idea of making each portrait a 1-to-1 scaled, full-sized figure in an iconic pose so that people visiting the Marvel offices could pose and take their pictures with their favorites. Not only did Alex Ross envision the wall to be at full scale and allow people to interact with it, but his original design included a lot of characters. Like a lot. Ross began sketching and laying out the piece, working through countless layouts and drafts before finally hitting on one that he liked enough to sketch up and really work out and submit a fully rendered pencil version of to Marvel. Once they approved the image though, Ross got the measurements for the wall that he was going to be putting the mural on back. And since the figures were going to be 1-to-1 scale, they had to be a certain size, and he had to double the scope of his original design, including twice as many characters as the initial layout. Thankfully, Ross had spent the better part of the entire last year laying out the design, and he was able to take his original 11x17 image and just do a second half of the drawing, including some 16 new figures. While a brutal task to be sure, Ross has been in this boat before and is one of the very few artists out there, besides George Perez, who seems to enjoy the masochism of incorporating inordinate amount of characters in their illustrations. Ross has worked on some absolutely insane pieces incorporating hundreds of figures before, namely for the legendary cover of the Crisis on Infinite Earths reissue in the early 1990s. He is well versed in the myriad of problems that including this many characters in a composition can inadvertently create, and to curb as many of them as possible, Ross decided on painting each figure alone and then creating a digital composite with all of the figures together to create one large image for the final mural. Ross always seems to be thinking on another level, incorporating ideas and evolving with his paintings from piece to piece, and this was no exception. While painting the figures on their own did make it easier for him to fix any problems that might arise without fear of destroying another figure in the process, as well as really concentrate on getting every character just right, it seems as though Ross always had something far more ingenious and clever already mapped out in his head, and he made Marvel a suggestion they couldn't refuse. While it's always been somewhat of a hotbed of controversy for the community prior to the COVID-19 shutdown, Marvel had been drawing some real flack from both fans and retailers alike for the amount of variants that they were producing. With larger releases regularly featuring more than 20 or 30 covers, people are starting to talk up. Following the COVID-19 shutdown and the absolutely devastating monetary setbacks that a lot of brick and mortar comic stores especially have faced, Marvel agreed to reduce the number of variants they were producing. Appearances can be deceiving though, and while this may appear altruistic, it was also no doubt done in an attempt to mitigate overproduction, as already dwindling orders continue to be in question today. Despite the promise to dial back on variants, once things were somewhat handled and it was apparent that stores were going to offer their loyal readers their comics any way that they could, with curbside pickup and delivery services popping up all over the nation, Marvel basically kicked back into full gear. While they did technically stay true to their word, in most cases at least, cutting back on the number of retailer incentive variants, especially where a store is obligated to buy a certain number of the regular cover, usually 10, 25, 50, but sometimes getting into the hundreds and thousands of copies to get a single copy of a variant cover. It seems that they're rather reluctant to completely give up what they invariably see as the cash cow of getting collectors to buy multiple copies of the same comic for different covers. Now, rather than dozens of incentive retailer covers, Marvel has begun offering up cover B variants across any number of their titles, following a theme almost every month. Most recently, to capitalize on the Donny Cates Venom Mega event, King in Black, they created a series of nullified variant covers, which were a lot like the Carnageized covers series that they did a few months ago, featuring many of Marvel's most popular characters in their own Carnage symbiotes on variant covers. And while the Carnageized and nullified variants might not necessarily be your bag, they did at least follow a kind of coherent theme. The recent Alien series of covers appears to me to be proof positive of how far Marvel is willing to reach when it comes to capitalizing on the variant cover market. I have no clue why I've seen what feels like more than a dozen covers of famous Marvel characters fighting xenomorphs, other than the fact that Marvel is just hoping anyone will buy them. It really feels like they're grasping at straws, and I get the feeling that when Alex Ross suggested that they use the already separated images of the figures from his painting for the mural which he'd already been paid for, as the variant theme in both September and October, spanning more than 30 titles, Marvel probably didn't take much convincing. Ross has become extremely well known after breaking into the industry during the tumultuous 1990s, not only because of his extraordinary paintings, his fastidious work ethic, or his almost inexplicable ability to meet any deadline that he agrees to, but because he's also a genius businessman. And he had a plan for the Marvel mural that extended far beyond simply putting a picture on the wall in the Marvel offices. Not only did Alex Ross pitch releasing the single portrait images as variant covers, there were a host of incentive versions of those variant covers. There were even incentive variants of many of his preliminary pencil sketches as well. If at least 3 versions of Ross's 34 illustrations were not enough of a utilization of the work that Alex Ross had already done, they're now releasing all 34 single images as well as the complete mural image in a poster book. While he may have simply been approached about doing a mural for the Marvel offices, in Ross's hands, the project took on an entirely new life, the scope of which is absolutely fantastic. But what I find perhaps most interesting in regards to all of this about Alex Ross himself is the way in which it demonstrates that while Ross might prefer to work with physical media on paper with pens and pencils and paintbrushes, he's far from blind to or above utilizing the multitude of advantages that digital technology can afford artists today. As a self-invented entrepreneur and world-renowned artist at this point, who has for his own part basically shunned digital drawing techniques, I find it extremely interesting to see how he does sparingly apply it to his own process. In this case, in regards not only to the production and reproduction of his art, but its function and utilization as well. I also thought it was a pretty interesting follow-up to my last video about him, where I went into detail about the real reason that Alex Ross doesn't paint digitally. And if you want to check that out and learn more, again, there should be a card around here. And as always, if not, there is a link in the description below. At times, Alex Ross can sound like he's wholly and completely anti-technology, but I've never believed that that was the case. I think there's a multitude of reasons that Ross produces his work traditionally in most cases, many of which I talked about in that video, but according to interviews, even the master himself is not above scanning in an image and adjusting the saturation a little, or tweaking the hues a tiny bit. It can be a slippery slope, but if nothing else, Alex Ross's timeless variants show that he's far from out of his element when dealing with technology, and I thought that their somewhat secret origins were actually pretty interesting, and I hope you did too. Thanks so much for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed, maybe even learned something. As always, a list of my sources as well as links to any of my digitally available sources, along with a list of further reading, can be found in the description below. If you did enjoy what you see, do me a favor and hit that like button. Think about getting in the comments section below and letting me know. Share these videos with your friends. If you really enjoyed what you see, make sure you Hulk smash that subscribe button. If you do that, make sure you ding the little notification bell and make sure you turn on notifications so you never miss another video premiere again. If you feel like you're in a position to support the channel, there are links to my Patreon, shirts, and tons of other merchandise in the description below. Thanks to everybody who's already picked something up, and again for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you again for all of the kind words while I was in the hospital. It means the world to me. And as always, I really, truly, and honestly ask only 2 things. Keep hitting those local shops, keep reading comics.